She was 26 years old, blonde hair floating in the water like silk ribbons, her eyes open but seeing nothing. 50 feet below the surface of the Australian Ocean, Emily Richardson's body lay motionless on the seafloor, her wedding ring catching the filtered sunlight from above. Just 11 days earlier, this same woman had walked down the aisle in Birmingham, Alabama, wearing a white dress and the brightest smile anyone had ever seen. Her new husband Marcus had promised to love her, protect her, cherish her, until death do them part. But now, as rescue divers pulled her lifeless body from the depths of the Great Barrier Reef, one question echoed through everyone's mind. How does an experienced rescue diver watch his wife drown without trying to save her? Welcome to Silent Witness True Crime Stories. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe, and also download your free ebook by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Birmingham, Alabama. The wedding was everything Emily Richardson had dreamed of since she was a little girl. White roses everywhere, her father walking her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Marcus Wellington standing at the altar looking like he had won the lottery. But Emily's adoptive father, Thomas Richardson, stood in the front row trying to smile, though anyone who knew him well could see the worry behind his eyes. He had never quite warmed to Marcus. There was something about the way Marcus pursued his daughter that felt less like romance and more like determination. When Marcus had asked for Emily's hand in marriage, Thomas had hesitated. But Marcus did not wait for an answer. He proposed anyway, and Emily said yes. Emily Richardson had grown up knowing she was chosen, knowing she was loved beyond measure by her adoptive parents. She studied psychology at the University of Alabama, dreaming of helping children who came from broken homes like she had. She loved animals with a fierce passion, spent her weekends volunteering at the local shelter, and her favorite movie was Gone with the Wind. She had been engaged once before to a guy named David, a quiet engineering student who treated her like she was precious. But that relationship had ended amicably, and by New Year's Eve 2002, Emily was ready to start fresh. That is when Marcus Wellington entered her life like a storm. Marcus was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair and the kind of confidence that filled a room. He was studying business at the University of Alabama, came from a family with money, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when he talked to you. The problem was, Marcus had noticed Emily long before New Year's Eve. Emily was still with David when Marcus first asked her out. She politely declined, showing him her engagement ring. Marcus smiled and said he would wait. He asked again 2 weeks later. Emily said no again. He asked a third time, a fourth, a fifth. Emily's friends started to feel uncomfortable with Marcus's persistence. One of them, Jessica, told Emily it was creepy how he would not take no for an answer. But Emily saw it differently. She thought it was romantic that someone wanted her that badly. When Emily broke off her engagement to David in December 2002, Marcus knew within hours. At the New Year's Eve party a few weeks later, Marcus was there, and Emily was there, and by the end of the night, they were together. Emily was swept off her feet. Marcus took her to expensive restaurants, bought her jewelry, talked about their future together like it was already written in stone. He was attentive, texting her constantly, calling her multiple times a day, wanting to know where she was and who she was with. Emily thought it meant he cared. Her friends thought it meant something else entirely. 6 months into their relationship, Marcus proposed at a fancy restaurant in front of dozens of strangers. She said yes because, how do you say no when someone loves you that much? When everyone is watching and clapping and expecting you to be happy? The wedding planning consumed the next several months. Emily was excited about every detail except one, the honeymoon. Marcus had his heart set on going to Australia. He was obsessed with scuba diving and wanted to take Emily to the Great Barrier Reef to see the famous Yongala shipwreck. Emily had never been diving in her life. She was terrified of deep water, had recurring nightmares about drowning, and on top of that, she had a heart condition, supraventricular tachycardia. It meant her heart sometimes beat irregularly, and her cardiologist had specifically told her to avoid situations where her heart rate might spike unexpectedly. Scuba diving at depths of 50 to 60 feet definitely qualified. When Thomas and Margaret heard about Marcus's honeymoon plans, they were horrified. They sat Emily down and begged her to reconsider. Emily promised to talk to Marcus about it, but when she brought it up, Marcus shut down the conversation. He told her he had done everything she wanted for the wedding. Now it was his turn. He wanted to share his passion with her. Was she really going to deny him this one thing? Emily tried to explain about her heart condition, about her fear of deep water, but Marcus had an answer for everything. He was a certified rescue diver. He had years of experience. He would keep her safe. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to be the kind of wife who supported her husband's interests, so she signed up for diving lessons in the summer of 2003, earning her basic diving certificate 6 weeks before the wedding. Her instructor noted on her file that she was nervous and hesitant but determined to overcome her fear. Then came the life insurance conversation. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus brought it up casually over dinner. Emily had a life insurance policy through her job, $50,000, with her father Thomas listed as the beneficiary. Marcus suggested she should increase it to $100,000 and change the beneficiary to him. After all, they were about to be married. Emily felt uncomfortable with the request but did not know how to say no. She told her father about it the next day. Thomas Richardson felt his blood run cold. He made her promise not to change the beneficiary until after the honeymoon. Emily agreed. She told Marcus she had taken care of the paperwork. Marcus believed her. Thomas would later say that lie probably saved his family from financial ruin, even though it could not save his daughter's life. October 11th, 2003. The wedding went off without a hitch. Emily looked radiant. Marcus looked proud. The next morning, they boarded a plane to Sydney, Australia. The flight was 20 hours. Emily barely slept. She kept thinking about the diving, about the deep water, about the shipwreck they would visit. Marcus spent most of the flight reading diving magazines and talking about the Yongala, a ship that had sunk in 1911 during a cyclone. Emily smiled and nodded, but her hands were shaking. They landed in Sydney on October 14th. For the next week, they played tourist. They visited the Sydney Opera House, took photos at Bondi Beach, went to the zoo where Emily finally got to hold a koala bear. In the photos from that week, Emily looks happy but tired. Friends who saw the pictures later said there was something in her eyes that looked sad. On October 21st, they flew to Townsville and checked into a hotel near the marina. That evening, they walked down to the docks and found the boat they would be on for the next 2 days. It was called the Spoil Sport. Emily barely slept that night. She lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Marcus snore beside her, wondering if she should just refuse to go. But how could she do that now? They had paid for the trip. Marcus had planned everything. Backing out would ruin the honeymoon, maybe ruin the marriage before it even really started. So when the alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning on October 22nd, Emily got up, got dressed, and followed her husband down to the docks. The Spoil Sport left port at 6 a.m. The dive leader, a man named Wade Singleton, had been working on these boats for over a decade. At 9 a.m., Wade gathered all the divers for a safety briefing. He explained that the Yongala was an advanced location, not suitable for beginners. The current could be strong. Visibility could change quickly. Wade specifically looked at Emily and Marcus when he mentioned the buddy system. He could tell Emily was nervous. He asked if they wanted to do an orientation session first, something shallower and easier to help Emily get comfortable. Marcus said no. They were fine. Wade was not convinced, but he could not force people to take his advice. He watched as Marcus and Emily started putting on their gear. Then Marcus did something that caught Wade's attention. He started adding weight to Emily's belt. Weights help divers descend and stay underwater. For someone of Emily's size and experience level, 8 to 10 pounds would be appropriate. Wade watched as Marcus clipped on weight after weight. 10 pounds. 15 pounds. 20 pounds. Wade walked over and asked if Marcus was sure about that much weight. Marcus said yes, he knew what his wife needed. Wade backed off but made a mental note. 20 pounds was excessive for a small woman. It would make it harder for her to ascend quickly if she got into trouble. At 9:30, Emily and Marcus rolled backward off the side of the spoilsport into the crystal blue water of the Coral Sea. Less than 5 minutes later, Marcus came rocketing back up to the surface. He was yelling something about his dive computer not working. Wade helped him back onto the boat. Marcus fiddled with the batteries on his wrist computer for a few minutes, declared it fixed, and went back into the water. Emily had waited for him at about 15 feet below the surface. They descended together again. According to what Marcus would later tell police, Emily started to panic about 10 minutes in. They had been swimming against a current, which was exhausting for a new diver, and Emily suddenly decided she wanted to go back up. She reached for Marcus to get his attention, and in her panic, she knocked his mask off his face. Marcus said he struggled to get his mask back in place, and when he finally cleared it and could see again, Emily was sinking. But several of the other divers saw something different. One diver named Gary reported seeing Marcus and Emily together near the wreck. He said Marcus had his arms wrapped around Emily from behind in what looked like a tight bear hug. Gary thought maybe they were just being affectionate, newlyweds underwater. So he did not think much of it. But then he saw Emily go limp. Her body stopped moving. Her arms floated to her sides, and Marcus let her go. Another diver, a woman named Sharon, had been filming with an underwater camera. She accidentally captured Emily's body lying on the sea floor. In the video, Emily is face up, her regulator still in her mouth, her arms spread out. The weights Marcus had clipped to her belt were clearly visible, pulling her down, keeping her on the bottom. When Marcus surfaced the second time, he was not panicking. Wade Singleton would later testify that Marcus seemed oddly calm. He told Wade that his wife was in trouble, that she was at the bottom, that someone needed to go get her. Wade did not hesitate. He grabbed his gear and went over the side. It took him 90 seconds to reach Emily, grab her, and bring her back to the surface. 90 seconds. For an experienced rescue diver like Marcus, it should have been simple. The question everyone would ask later was why Marcus did not do it himself. Wade and another crew member started CPR immediately. They worked on her for 41 minutes. Marcus did not come over to help. He stayed on the spoilsport. Several divers said his behavior was strange. He was not crying. He was not pacing. He was just standing there, watching from a distance, and occasionally asking people for hugs. At 11:21 a.m., Emily Richardson was pronounced dead. Marcus called his family before he called Emily's. He phoned his father and told him there had been an accident, that Emily had drowned, that he needed the family lawyer to start making calls. He asked his father to notify Emily's parents because he did not think he could handle telling them himself. Thomas Richardson got the call at 3 a.m, Alabama time. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus's father, and he was saying words that did not make sense. "Your daughter drowned in Australia. There was an accident." Thomas dropped the phone. They would need to fly to Australia to identify the body and make arrangements to bring Emily home. The autopsy results came back 3 days later. Emily had died from drowning. But there were other findings that made the medical examiner pause. Emily had an air embolism in her bloodstream. Air embolisms happen when a diver holds their breath while ascending or comes up too fast. Emily's embolism suggested she had tried to hold her breath, possibly in a panic, or that something had prevented her from breathing normally. There were no bruises on her body except for minor marks from CPR, no signs of a struggle. But the medical examiner noted something unusual. Emily's regulator had been in her mouth when she was found. If she had panicked and knocked off Marcus's mask, as he claimed, why was her own regulator still in place? Why had she not ripped it out in her panic? Australian water police began interviewing everyone who had been on the spoilsport that day. They talked to Wade about Marcus refusing the orientation and adding too much weight to Emily's belt. They talked to Gary, who described seeing Marcus holding Emily in a bear hug. They talked to Sharon, who shared her underwater video footage. and they talked to Marcus. His story changed 3 times. The first time, he said Emily had panicked and knocked off his mask and sank before he could help her. The second time, BK.own faced. He said he tried to go after her, but she was sinking too fast. The third time, he admitted that he had grabbed Emily when she started to panic, trying to calm her down, but she had fought against him, and he had to let her go. The police asked him why. As a certified rescue diver, he had not saved his wife. Marcus said he froze. He said he was too scared. The detective leading the investigation was a woman named Senior Sergeant Karen Phillips. Something about Marcus's story felt wrong to her. She started looking into his background. She found out about the life insurance, about how Marcus had tried to make himself the beneficiary right before the wedding. She interviewed Emily's friends back in Alabama over the phone. One friend, Jessica, told her that Emily had called her 2 days before the wedding, crying, saying she was not sure if she wanted to go through with it. Jessica had asked her why, and Emily said Marcus was scaring her. He had been checking her phone, questioning her about where she went and who she talked to, getting angry if she did not respond to his texts within minutes. Jessica told Emily she should call off the wedding. Emily said she could not. Everything was planned. Everyone was coming. Marcus would be humiliated. Detective Phillips requested Marcus's dive computer. When the data was downloaded, it showed something interesting. Marcus had been at depth with Emily for 10 minutes, exactly as he said, but it also showed that he had been stationary for several of those minutes. He had not been swimming around looking for his wife. He had been in one place, at the same depth as Emily, for almost 3 full minutes before he surfaced. 3 minutes is an eternity underwater. 3 minutes is enough time to turn off someone's regulator. 3 minutes is enough time to hold someone until they stop moving. Detective Phillips was building a theory. She believed that Marcus had planned this. He had insisted on the dangerous location. He had added extra weight to Emily's equipment. He had refused the orientation that might have saved her life. And then, once they were underwater, away from witnesses, he had turned off her air supply and held her until she passed out. But proving it was another matter. There were no witnesses who saw exactly what happened underwater. The video footage showed Emily's body on the seafloor, but did not show how she got there. Marcus's dive computer suggested suspicious behavior, but did not prove murder. Detective Phillips spent months gathering evidence, trying to build a case strong enough for the Australian prosecutors to file charges. In the meantime, Marcus went home to Alabama. Emily's body was finally released 6 weeks after her death. Thomas and Margaret brought their daughter home and buried her in a cemetery just outside Birmingham. More than 300 people attended the funeral. Marcus was there, sitting in the front row, crying into his hands. After the service, several of Emily's friends gathered at Jessica's apartment. They were looking through photos, remembering their friend, when Marcus showed up uninvited. He had a folder of pictures from the honeymoon. He wanted to share memories of Emily, he said. Marcus opened his laptop and started showing pictures. Sydney Opera House, Bondi Beach, Emily holding a koala bear. Then a picture came up that made everyone in the room go silent. It was Emily, standing next to a sign at the beach. The sign read, in bold red letters, "Danger, strong currents, risk of drowning." Emily was smiling in the photo, pointing at the sign like it was a joke. Someone asked him why he would photograph his wife next to a drowning warning sign right before taking her on a dangerous dive. Marcus said it was just a funny coincidence. Nobody laughed. 3 months after Emily's death, Marcus was seen at Emily's grave. It was late at night, and a cemetery worker noticed him using bolt cutters to remove flowers from the headstone. The worker called the police. When officers arrived, Marcus was gone, but the bolt cutters were there, and several flower arrangements had been destroyed. Thomas Richardson was devastated. Who cuts flowers off their wife's grave? In June 2008, nearly 5 years after Emily's death, Australian authorities finally felt they had enough evidence. They charged Marcus Wellington with murder. By this time, Marcus was living in Mobile, Alabama, working for his father's real estate company, and engaged to a woman named Kim Lewis. Kim looked remarkably like Emily. Blonde, petite, sweet smile. They had known each other in high school. Kim believed Marcus's story about the accident. She stood by him when he was arrested. She married him while he was fighting extradition to Australia. Marcus fought the extradition for 2 years, hiring expensive lawyers, filing appeals, claiming he could not get a fair trial in Australia. But in 2010, the Australian government prevailed. Marcus was put on a plane and flown back to Townsville to face justice. The trial began in February 2011. The prosecution laid out their case. The dive computer data, the witness testimony, the excessive weights, the life insurance motive, the strange behavior after Emily's death. The prosecution argued that Marcus had planned to kill Emily from the moment he insisted on the dangerous location. The defense argued it was a tragic accident. Emily was inexperienced. She panicked. Marcus froze. He was not a murderer. He was a man who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of fear. The trial lasted 3 weeks. In the end, the jury could not agree. There was not enough direct evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Marcus had intentionally killed Emily. The prosecutor made a deal. If Marcus would plead guilty to criminally negligent manslaughter, the murder charge would be dropped. Marcus agreed. He stood in front of the judge and admitted that his actions, his insistence on the dangerous dive, his failure to perform a proper rescue, his negligence, had caused Emily's death. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison. With time served and good behavior, Marcus was released after 18 months. Thomas and Margaret Richardson were destroyed. 18 months for their daughter's life. 18 months for the years of memories they would never have, the grandchildren who would never exist, the phone calls every morning that had stopped forever. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But the story was not over. When Marcus returned to Alabama in 2012, American prosecutors were waiting. They believed that because Marcus had planned the trip and made the arrangements while in Alabama, they had jurisdiction to try him for murder under U.S. law. An Alabama grand jury indicted Marcus on murder charges in October 2012. Thomas Richardson dared to hope again. The trial began in February 2013, but after 2 weeks, the judge made a stunning ruling. He dismissed the case. He said the prosecution had not presented enough new evidence to warrant a second trial. Marcus Wellington walked out of the courthouse, a free man. Thomas Richardson collapsed in the hallway. It was over. Emily would never get justice. Marcus moved back to Mobile with his wife Kim. They bought a house. He went back to work for his father's company. He lived his life. In interviews years later, Marcus insisted he was innocent. He said the Australian legal system had coerced him into pleading guilty. He said he was a victim of circumstance, of panic, of bad luck. He said he loved Emily and would never have hurt her. But the people who knew Emily, the friends who saw her in those final weeks before the wedding, the family who watched Marcus control and manipulate her, they knew the truth. Emily had been afraid. She had wanted to call off the wedding but felt trapped. She had told her father she did not want to change the life insurance beneficiary. She had tried to protect herself in the only ways she knew how. But it was not enough. Here is what we know for certain. Emily Richardson was 26 years old when she died. She was terrified of deep water. She had a heart condition that made diving dangerous. Her family begged her not to go on that honeymoon. But she went anyway, because she thought it was what a good wife should do. She thought if she could just make Marcus happy, everything would be okay. And maybe that is the most tragic part of this story. Emily died trying to be the perfect wife for a man who may have been planning her death all along. How many times do we ignore our instincts because we are worried about disappointing someone? Emily's friends said she had almost called off the wedding 3 different times. 3 times she almost saved her own life. 3 times she talked herself back into going through with it. There is something else that haunts this case. Marcus was a certified rescue diver. He had spent years training for emergency situations underwater. He knew how to save someone who was drowning. And yet, when his wife was 50 feet below him, dying, he swam to the surface and asked for help instead of helping her himself. Wade Singleton, the dive leader, reached Emily in 90 seconds. Marcus could have done the same, but he did not. Why? Was it panic, as he claimed? Was it fear? Or was it something else entirely? The prosecution believed Marcus held Emily underwater until she lost consciousness, then turned her air back on and let her sink. If that is true, it means he looked into her eyes as she struggled. He felt her fighting against him. He waited for her body to go limp, and then he let her go. Can you imagine that level of coldness? That is not panic. That is not an accident. But here is what makes this case even more disturbing. Even if you believe Marcus's story, even if you believe Emily panicked and knocked off his mask and sank before he could help her, the fact remains that he put her in that situation. He insisted on the dangerous location against her parents' wishes. He refused the orientation that might have saved her life. He added excessive weight to her belt, making it harder for her to surface if something went wrong, and he ignored all the signs that his wife was not ready. Every decision Marcus made that day put Emily in danger. Every choice he made increased the likelihood that something would go wrong. Is that murder? Legally, the jury did not think so. But what do you call it when you knowingly put someone you claim to love in a situation where they might die? Thomas Richardson spent the rest of his life asking that question. He died in 2019 at the age of 73, his heart broken, still fighting for his daughter's memory. Margaret Richardson followed him a year later. They never got to see Marcus face consequences for what he did to Emily. They never got closure. They never got justice. And that is perhaps the cruelest part of this story. The people who loved Emily most had to watch her killer walk free, remarry, live a normal life, while their daughter lay in a cemetery, forever, 26 years old. How would you feel if that was your daughter? Your sister? Your friend? How would you feel watching the person responsible for her death walk out of a courtroom smiling, holding his new wife's hand, talking about moving on with his life? Emily's friends started a foundation in her name after she died, the Emily Richardson Water Safety Foundation. It provides scholarships for underprivileged kids to learn how to swim, how to be safe in the water, how to recognize danger. They also run programs for young women about recognizing signs of controlling relationships, about understanding that love should not make you feel afraid, about learning to trust your instincts even when someone is pressuring you to ignore them. Thousands of young women have gone through these programs. Maybe Emily's death was not completely in vain. Maybe her story has saved others. But that is cold comfort to the people who loved her. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. Do you believe Marcus Wellington killed his wife? Do you believe he planned it, executed it, and got away with it? Or do you believe this was a tragic accident, a series of bad decisions that led to an unthinkable outcome? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think really happened in that ocean on October 22nd, 2003. And here is another question. If you were Emily's friend, and she called you 2 days before her wedding saying she was scared, saying her fiancé was controlling, what would you tell her? Would you tell her to call it off? Or would you tell her it was just cold feet, that every bride gets nervous? We want to believe we would speak up. But would we really? This case reminds us that sometimes love looks like speaking uncomfortable truths. Sometimes love looks like telling someone they are making a mistake, even if they get angry with you. Emily Richardson should be 47 years old right now. She should have crow's feet around her eyes from smiling. She should have teenagers driving her crazy. She should be calling her parents every morning like she always did. She should be living. Instead, she is a cautionary tale. A reminder of what can happen when we ignore our instincts. Think about the people in your life. Think about whether you are with someone who makes you feel safe or someone who makes you feel afraid. Think about whether you are ignoring red flags because you have invested too much time to walk away. Because that is what Emily did. She died trying to be the perfect wife. She died trying to make her husband happy. She died because she was too afraid to say no. Do not be like Emily. Do not ignore your instincts. Do not stay with someone who controls you, who pressures you, who makes you afraid. Do not get on a plane to a place you do not want to go, to do something that terrifies you, just because someone tells you that is what love looks like. Love should not be terrifying. Love should not require you to risk your life. Love should feel safe. And if it does not, it is not love. It is something else entirely. Something dangerous. If this story affected you, if you see yourself in Emily's choices, if you recognize the patterns in your own relationship, please reach out for help. Talk to someone you trust. You deserve to be alive. You deserve to be happy. Emily Richardson never got the chance to leave. She died before she could save herself. But you are still here. You can still choose differently. Thank you for watching. If this documentary made you think, made you feel something, please share it. Let us know in the comments what you think happened in that ocean. Was it murder, or was it an accident? We read every single comment. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that matter, stories that might save someone's life, subscribe to our channel. We post new documentaries every week. Until next time, stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember that your life is worth more than someone else's happiness.